today we have Dr. Stephen Cabral on. He is a naturopathic doctor. We talked about so many really great things. We talked about heavy metals. We talked about electromagnetic fields or electrosmog. We talked about tap water, inflammation, sick building, and sick home syndrome. So many really great things in his new book, which is called The Rain Barrel Effect. So let's welcome Dr. Stephen Cabral.
We are so excited to have Dr. Stephen Cabral here. Thanks so much for coming on.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes. So how did you get into functional medicine? Let's start there. I want to hear a little bit more on your story, and then we'll get into all your knowledge.
Yeah, I think like a lot of natural health-based practitioners, you're trying to find your own answers, at least in the beginning. And then you never knew before that there was a whole field dedicated to essentially the human body and the mind and how they work together. And all of the different things that you can do besides conventional medicine, pharmaceuticals, or surgery, or whatever it might be, to begin to make the body whole again. And so once I realized that I was able to go deeper into my own nervous system and the adrenal glands and thyroid and all the other issues there are within the body, I realized that, yes, I could take pharmaceuticals in order to begin my own healing journey, but it wasn't going to solve the ultimate issue of what was wrong with me. And so for me, at 17 years old, I got extremely sick. I ended up with autoimmune issues, viral-based issues like Epstein-Barr virus and Addison's disease and rheumatoid arthritis, and even type 2 diabetes. And so it was a cascading event, and I kept getting worse. And so they kept giving me more and more pharmaceuticals, and I got it because those started to palliate the symptoms. But I saw this progression at just 17, 18, 19 years old, that this wasn't going to get better on its own. And at that point, this is like the mid-90s, kind of pre-internet, I just started to go and meet with natural health-based practitioners, didn't even know the field existed. And that just kind of blew my mind open. And from there, started to meet with great people and continue the journey of healing.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like we all can relate to that, right? Most of our own health journey, and then we start getting passionate about these various topics and just want to help as many people as we can, right? I feel like that's a common theme. You find that too?
Without a doubt. And one of the things was I still didn't have the maybe confidence to go on my own and do it. So I started with nutrition. As a nutritionist, I started as a personal trainer, then strength and conditioning, and I still wasn't better yet. And a lot of us, we don't want to become a health coach, or we don't want to become a doctor or acupuncturist, whatever it might be, until we're better, because we feel like, well, we're some type of fraud or whatever it might be. Like if we can't get well, why we should be able to help others. But the truth is that we're always our own hardest person to solve, like, because it's us. And the second is that the journey never ends. So I got well. It took me 10 years, unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, because I had to learn along the way. So I had to learn basically everything not to do and everything to do in order to get well. I finally meet my mentor, who combines functional medicine lab testing with genetics, with essentially Ayurvedic medicine. And I said, this is really powerful. I want to go on and do this. I got well within a period of 6 months. No more autoimmune, rheumatoid arthritis, type 2 diabetes, Addison's, etc. And of course, there was healing along the way, but I was still relapsing. And then she said, just that little nudge, she said, with all that you've read and all that you've done and with your background, why aren't you going back to get your degree? Why aren't you going to do this as a career? And that's all I really needed. And then I said, yeah, like this is my passion. This is what I love to do.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so true, because you're always working on it, and sometimes even, for me, I have mast cell activation syndrome. I'm really, really great, but sometimes I'm not, sometimes I will be exposed to mold. I had a mold remediator here today digging a hole in my wall because I'm like, I smell something, because I'm so terrified to end up back there. But, you can get exposed to things or be under really stressful situations, and you can get more symptomatic. So I love how you said that, like, you don't have to necessarily be perfect to start helping other people, because sometimes you're just not
reality sometimes.
No, and the human body's not static either. I mean, that's the thing, is that I myself had mastocytosis, mast cell activation syndrome as well, and still do. It's part of my genetics,
right?
It's just, if I don't get to that point of staying within what I can do and keep my body balanced. I mean, I had candida, I had SIBO, I had H. pylori, I had increased intestinal permeability or leaky gut. So I was never going to fix my mast cell issues and all my allergies until I fixed that. So I was looking at the deeper root causes. And now, if I want to, I can have a glass of red wine. I could have something where typically before my eyes would become bloodshot and itchy and red. And I would look literally like a mess, and I was, just with one glass of wine. Now I can have a glass of wine. It's not a big deal. But if you were to give me like an aged steak with a glass of red wine sitting in a moldy hotel room, yeah, my my histamine is going to go crazy. And so
it's going to hit the fan. Exactly.
Yeah. So it's like the bucket. And so speaking of that, you have a new book, and it's called The Rain Barrel Effect. This is the book right here. It's really good. So
thank you.
Can you start by explaining what the rain barrel effect is?
Yeah, so this was the big breakthrough for me. And this was around, let's say like 2021, because I was still going to both conventional medicine doctors and natural health practitioners. And that's, I think, how most people are in the beginning of their journey. And the thing is, if you've grown up in conventional medicine the whole time, it's very hard to let go of a pill for every ill. And so I said, I have terrible allergies. Like they're awful. They actually inhibited me from working about 3 weeks of the year at the end of every April. That's how bad they were. So basically I would walk outside in Boston, there'd be pollen falling from the trees, or it's actually right when they were budding. That was my worst time. And it was like pepper spray in my eyes. My eyes were dry and glassy and cut and always running. It was awful. I mean, I just couldn't operate that way. So I said, okay, I could take 8 Benadryl a day and it would have no effect on me. Like that's how bad it was. But also I didn't understand back then that there's more than just histamines that end up aggravating allergies. And again, this is part of the learning process. So my issue is more of a leukotriene and other prostaglandins that affect me to a greater degree. And so what I did, I was sitting in an allergist office, and I read this obscure research paper. Even back then, I like to just nerd out and just, read whatever they had in there for research papers. And there was something on a term just called the rain barrel effect. And no one was really talking about it. Even to this day, like nobody talks about the rain barrel effect. And I realized like, that's why I have low-level allergies all year round. At least I did back in the day. But every April, the whole world would begin to blossom, at least in Boston, right? And so at that time, all that pollen, so a rain barrel, for those of you who don't know, I didn't know this growing up, but they basically collects rainwater that comes off your house through a gutter so that it just doesn't splash all over your grass and destroy your yard or patio, et cetera. It fills up a rain barrel. And then when the rain barrel, though, starts to get to the top, most of us never check on it. It still can overflow and it can still destroy your garden, your yard, whatever it might be. Well, for me, low-level allergies, that kind of filled it up, and then stress a little bit higher, then all the gut issues, then the heavy metals. I was a poor college student, and I was eating rice with cheap olive oil, which was definitely oxidized, and then tuna every night. And so then lo and behold, I had super high levels of mercury from eating just canned tuna every single night. And so all these things were filling up, and I was never that well. And then the littlest thing, lack of sleep or pollen, set me off. And now you would think like, oh, well, it's the lack of sleep or it's the pollen. No, it's everything that leads up that's causing little symptoms along the way, when eventually then you're diagnosed with disease. But as I typically say, there's really no such thing as disease. There's a collection of symptoms that we give a name to. And because of that, we think that we need to treat the disease, when rather we need to look at the specific things that filled up the rain barrel that allowed it to then overflow. So it's all about, well, 2 parts of it is emptying the rain barrel. That's one part that we help people in our practice, and I know that you do the same. And the other part is the deficiencies. So one's toxicity and the other side is deficiencies, because many people along the way, as they get older, they use up a lot of their vital reserves, and magnesium is a big one of them because of the stress that we're under, and all the other things that go on within our lives. So what we like to look at is 1 part toxicity and 1 part deficiencies. But the more deficiencies you have, the more your rain barrel begins to fill up, because you can't balance all of the toxins that are coming in.
I love that. It's very similar back to, you talk about the histamine bucket, with what you work with a lot with. So it's so true. It's things that compile. And if you are deficient in things, it's going to make things worse. And it's just a domino effect. So you talk a lot about toxic enemies in your book, which is great, which are these things that are filling up that rain barrel. We haven't touched that much on heavy metals in this podcast yet. And I really want you to go into heavy metals, because it is a big issue. And it's something we've seen in practice with so many patients too. So, how are we being exposed to these metals? And what kind of symptoms and issues are you seeing with this?
Yeah. So in the book, I go over the top 10, but there are many more, right? If we look at the environmental working group, there's over 100,000 now. And many people estimate it now at over 140,000 man-made chemicals, which is pretty insane because these are things that the human body for millions of years they would never be exposed to. So you'd only be exposed to the natural metals that would be in nature. Now we can certainly talk about those, and some of those are dangerous as they begin to build up as well. But if we look at it and we say, okay, well, what are they doing overseas? In Europe, there's only about 8,000. Now that number grows as well, but it's nowhere near even like it's 10% or so of what they allow in the United States. So it's also, people say they go overseas and they feel better, they can eat different foods. Yes, they're being exposed to less. And some of those are definitely heavy metals. Now, the ones that we typically know about, at least in medicine, we think about, okay, iron. Iron's a metal. If you get too much hemochromatosis, you get inflammation of the arteries, you get all sorts of issues with the body. But if we look at it, it's not radically different from, let's say, an arsenic or a cadmium or a mercury, or bromines, anything like that, that are well, we'll stick with the first three, that are absolutely detrimental to the thyroid. That's just one part. So if we look at those and we just say, okay, well, I don't really know if I believe this whole heavy metal thing, like that's okay. When we look at it, we say, what would those haloid group metals, how would they affect the thyroid? Well, one of the simplest ways is, besides the oxidative stress, the free radical damage they create, so from inflammation, right? So if you have autoimmune-based issues, heavy metals can be a huge issue, but they're going to displace a lot of the iodine that you need to make thyroid in the first place. So then what, 1 out of 5 women, 1 out of 8 at the very most conservative number, has low thyroid. All right, so, well, why do we have low thyroid? Now, it's not just because of heavy metals, but it's certainly a big issue and that we need to look into. And simply giving women, it's 1 out of 10 men, 1 out of 5 women, somewhere around there. It's basically double the amount of women than men that have low thyroid. But when we look at this, we say, what do? Do we just give the levothyroxine? Do we just give the pharmaceutical for more thyroid hormone? Or do we want to figure out why the body's not making that thyroid in the first place? So heavy metals affect all of the major glands of the body. And they also create massive oxidative stress, basically free radical damage in the body, which creates inflammation. And then inflammation leads to then susceptibility of whatever your genetics may be. And so for me, rheumatoid arthritis, or my family, mast cell activation syndrome, or, could be something like GERD or acid reflux, or those types of issues that also go along with histamine. So that's just one example. I'm happy to give others. Yeah. But if you don't get rid of those heavy metals, then you're always going to have the inflammation, which then is always going to lead to whatever you're genetically susceptible to having in your family.
And a lot of us, what I would say over the age of 40, maybe, have had, if you had fillings, the amalgam fillings. I mean, literally mercury sitting inside of your mouth, So for me, that was a big thing. I was a kid and I had a couple put in, and then I had them forever. And then, I got diagnosed with Hashimoto's and I had to be on medication, but then I got those out. And once I got those out and worked on heavy metal toxicity with the gut and all the other stuff, then I didn't have to take medication anymore personally. I mean, and I don't like to say, so just do that and you won't have to either, but you know what I mean?
Right.
So
no, that's a great success story. And it's true. Like, there's not always one method to healing, but that was yours. Like, that was your way of emptying that rain barrel and getting well again. And it's amazing to hear. I agree. I had to have 2 taken out. And it wasn't that long ago. It was probably like 7 years ago. So I was like well into my, career and all that. But when I looked at it, I knew I had to find the right biological dentist. And the reason is because if you go to a regular dentist, they literally just saw them, they cut them in half, and they take them out of your mouth. And so now you're exposed to way more mercury than you would ever be if you kept them in your mouth. Now, I do agree that you should have them taken out, but you want to go through a specific protocol with a biological dentist, and then using infrared sauna and heavy metal detox protocol and all the things along with it, because these are metals that are poisonous that you can die from. I mean, so it's very important.
Well, that's why they stopped using it. I mean, it's that serious for, and I would guess call it conventional medicine and dentistry, but to notice, oh, wait, maybe we should stop, putting these in is a big deal for sure.
And Dr. Steve, for listeners, where can they find, where are they getting some of these heavy metals? If they're wondering, am I doing something? Am I eating something? Where are they
There's
finding
always
that?
going to be some natural, let's call it like natural contamination with metals from the environment. So most of these metals are going to be prevalent in the soil, but it's not until they become concentrated in the body that it becomes an issue. So if we look at it, we have to look at like what's ubiquitous in the world that we live today. And those are things that we'd be most careful of. So when I was back in my day, in let's say the late 90s, I'm trying to heal, I couldn't do gluten, and which was strange back then in the mid 90s, couldn't do dairy, all those things, which is true. I had to eliminate those from my diet. And so I was doing rice cheese, rice milk, like everything was rice. And so, because that's what they had, they didn't have all these great alternatives like they have now, which some are great and some not so great, right? Like just because it's gluten-free, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a healthy food. But I was still thinking with my same, teenage mindset and early 20s that, well, I'm used to eating cheese and pizza. So I'm going to get a rice crust pizza and I'm going to get some rice cheese and I'm just going to put it on top. But like, for example, with rice, it can be contaminated with arsenic. And very few people necessarily look to say, does this have higher arsenic or not? So we look at the foods that we're exposed to, but water is a big one as well. And most people just assume that their municipality has clean water. And that's really not always the case. It's being tested for a couple hundred different contaminants, but not thousands of contaminants. It's certainly not looking at a lot of VOCs, volatile organic compounds, that can be essentially gases in the water that can come from the soil and environment too. It can come from agriculture runoff and much more. So foods, the mercury amalgams, for the most part, they need to be ingested unless you can think of another way yourself. But they're almost always ingested, where flame retardants and benzenes and other things like that can be inhaled or touched on the skin.
Yeah. So speaking of water, I know that you go into it, in a good detail in the book. So why is it so important to have clean water, and what's in our tap water other than the heavy metals?
So I've run a bunch of lab tests now. So I just do my own independent lab tests on water filters plus what I'm getting out of the tap. And then I can actually see, is this water filter actually working? And so I can give these recommendations to my wellness clients, just like you give to yours.
Sure.
And so when you look at these, some of them do test for those volatile organic compounds. And again, those can be given off by the formaldehydes that we have on certain furniture-based products, or flame retardants, which are on everything from an infant's mattress, believe it or not, which like I understand the philosophy. Okay, spray a mattress with flame retardant, so if it ever caught fire, well, it can't catch fire. But the problem is those things off gas for years, and now especially a new child, a new baby's breathing this in, and their detox capacity, which is their liver, their kidneys, their lungs, their skin, are not able to detox that at the same rate. So that can lead to some serious nervous system based issues. But in water, you're not going to see it, and you're not going to taste it. And that's the big issue. The only thing you typically taste in water is the chlorine. And chlorine is put in there to kill bacteria. So I get that, right? I mean, if we didn't chlorinate the water, it could become pretty dangerous. But the problem is we don't want to be drinking chlorine, which can kill a lot of our gut bacteria, good gut bacteria. And essentially, it's another thing that can actually damage the thyroid. So there are hundreds of contaminants with water. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, it's crazy, isn't it? With everything that we're exposed to without us, even thinking about it, something simple as drinking water. What kind of filters do you like working with, especially with your patients and things like that? What do you recommend?
So there's 3 right now that I recommend. So the first one is a whole house filter. And one of the reasons why we recommend that, and we had it in my wellness center and all that, is that then it takes care of your shower, your bath if you have kids, and then your drinking water. So that's really nice. It's typically always a reverse osmosis. And then you can have a countertop reverse osmosis, which is great. Now, I like reverse osmosis, but it pretty much does create inert, dead water. And so then you do want some way to remineralize it with trace minerals. Typically, you're stirring on a little bit of a vortex. You're creating a little bit of life to that water again. So I do like those. Those are the ones that you're going to be able to eliminate fluoride to the greatest degree as well. So fluoride isn't something that we've talked about in water. A lot of people try to make the argument that fluoride is good for your teeth to prevent cavities. There's some research that shows that you can make that argument, What you can't make an argument for is ingesting fluoride.
Right.
Ingesting fluoride is a known poison. Again, it hurts the thyroid. That's why like the thyroid is very fragile in terms
Yes.
of like the environment and
hear.
toxins. And so that's why so many people have thyroid-based issues. It's affected by the adrenals, it's affected by stress, it's affected by toxins, it's affected by gut, it's affected by food sensitivities. So when we start to understand that though, okay, we can go about fixing the thyroid. So fluoride is a really tough one. It's been shown, it's been proven when ingested, it lowers IQ in children, probably does as well, can lead to ADD, ADHD, nervous system toxicity, and much more. There is the Berkey filter. We've recommended the Berkey for years. I know they're going through their own issues right now. You know, what I would say is that the truth is that it's very difficult to remove fluoride from the water. And their fluoride filters are just, they're doing their best, but not that great at removing fluoride from the water, from what I've seen in my own testing, but still a great filter. Like a lot of people like to talk, like people they like to jump on when something's not going well for a company. I don't like to do that. I believe everybody should have a Berkey filter because reverse osmosis runs on electricity. And if you ever have a power outage, you want something that can filter water because the power outage is also happening at the municipality for your tap water as well. And so I'd be careful drinking tap water. We'll just put it that way.
And now you're in Florida, so you're around the hurricanes like me.
Yes.
Bless
you.
you.
And I have those generators only last for so long, right? So, you know, you can always there can always be a major incident that you never expect. And so I think it's a small investment to get yourself, the life straws are fine. A Berkey filter is going to be, I just think a nice one. It's gravity fed. You just literally fill up it and it's going to take care of most of your issues, especially that time. And the other thing too is, you know, you can drink spring water from a glass bottle, and that's a great thing, but it's also very expensive and there's shipping that goes along with it and all the other issues as well. So those are the three best ways that I can think of to help people get clean water, because it's about clean food, following the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15. And we can go over that if you haven't chatted about it before. Clean drinking water. So clean food, clean drinking water, and then clean air. And the clean air, especially in your home, we've talked about that, mold-free, and air filters. I just think that when I open up my air filter every single month to give it a little vacuum, I see all this stuff that I'd be breathing in, and it's pretty atrocious.
Yeah, we have air doctors and all. I have one right here.
Yes.
And like
Same.
all of our
They're a great company.
rooms.
Yeah.
Yes. So speaking of air, you know, one of your toxic enemies that you talk about in the book is electrosmog. So can you kind of get into that too?
Yeah, the electrosmog is really just something we've started talking about in general, myself included, over the last 10 years. And you know, a lot of people like to say, well, it started with 5G and all those different things. Not really, because we're not just talking about the actual strength of the signal. We're talking about all of our gadgets that are plugged in around us. And so what I try to tell people is I'm not looking to live, you know, in a cave, either like in the Himalayas with no technology. Like I like my technology. I like my laptop. I like my phone, all of those great things.
For the amazing things, right? I know.
100%. Yeah. I mean, like we wouldn't be having this conversation right now without all the amazing breakthroughs in technology. The problem is that we're surrounded by them all the time, and it does begin to fill up that rain barrel. And what we've seen is with people with multiple chemical sensitivities and any limbic system based damage, basically the nervous system just becomes so overwhelmed with stress over time, or heavy metals that can damage the nervous system. They become much more sensitive. Not everybody's sensitive to the same degree to EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, as well as not just the EMFs, but the radiation. And so what I started to do was just use EMF monitors and look at around the house all the different devices that gave it off. Now, the nice thing is, if you're 5 to 6 feet away from most of these devices, it's not as detrimental. Like the frequency dissipates very, very quickly. Some of the worst ones I found, though, were baby monitors. So baby monitors have such a powerful signal. I mean, I think probably with all intercoms, but they have a very strong one. And the other thing I didn't realize is that even if you don't have it plugged in, you shouldn't be sleeping with your head against an outlet. And how many of us have an outlet literally directly behind our bed? And if you were to take an EMF monitor, you can see all the dirty electricity, they call it, being given off without anything even plugged in. So immediately we just went to work and made basically no smart devices at all in our bedrooms or our daughter's bedrooms.
Yeah.
So that means that we've got, just plug in alarm clocks. Like if you want an alarm clock in there, no phones at night, no fancy wake up gadgets, anything like that. And at least for then 8 hours, and for my daughters, like 10 hours a night, they're not exposed to any of those things.
For sure.
Yeah.
Make that a priority. What are some other things in the home that people that are common that you commonly see with high EMF exposure?
So microwave ovens, I think a lot of people know about those, and they've heard about them. Electric ovens, or another one. Anything that's electrical that gives off a very high level of output, is a big one. But so people might be thinking about those. They always go back and forth. Is microwave food okay for you? Not okay for you? I'm actually not even talking about the nutritional value of the food or the radiation, etc. I'm talking about what's given off while you're actually microwaving your food. Now, it's a matter of, I think, further research to see if does any of that stay with your food. I would question that. I think anything that you can cook that quickly at high heat certainly degrades a lot of that nutritional value. But again, that can be debated. What can't be debated is the radiation that's given off by our microwave. Smart TVs that are essentially always on is another one that's giving off much more EMFs and radiation. Anytime you have your Wi-Fi router, that's of course a huge one. Those are always giving off signals. But then it's everything that you're not using, that you don't know that you're not using, that contains Bluetooth. And so think about all the different devices. If you were to open up your Bluetooth right now, you would see all the different things that are connected or trying to connect. And all of those things are now giving off EMFs. And I want to get to smart meters in just a second, because not a lot of people talk about smart meters in the home. But in your car, all cars now, where before you'd have like a radio with dials and knobs and all that, like no big deal. Now they have these massive computer screens. I mean, basically it's a computer inside your car now. And so even if it's not an electric vehicle, you're getting EMFs from all of the different dashboards that you have in your vehicle too. So the last one I wanted to mention was the smart meters. So smart meters basically take your electrical output reading on your house and beam it from home to home until it gets to a base station, or it can be beamed to a car that drives by the neighborhood that then picks up the amount of electricity that you've used. And it does this because back in the day, you would have someone just come and check your meter. Okay, how much power is this individual used? And then you get billed for that. But they obviously found that was very inefficient, took a lot of time. If they can just beam it from one house to the next house to the next house and then to a station, they would get everybody's readings that they needed, or a car driving by. Now, this in and of itself, you kind of think it's like, well, no big deal. Well, no, you're getting all of that from your neighbors beaming to you, or your meter is being able to connect to other devices at all time. It's another one of those Bluetooth-based issues. And the worst is when I used to live in a condo building, which I did for 20 years of my life, I always had, let's say, like, 20 people to my left and my right and above and below. And so now it seems like, it's almost impossible to escape that, even if you do it in your own home. So you do your best. There's things like Faraday blankets and Faraday-based paint, which contains copper or silver, which can essentially absorb. It blocks in a way, but it absorbs the EMFs. So you get less of that. That's helpful. And then there's devices that I think have potential, and I think very well can and may work. And I use them as well. I mean, one over my shoulder is the Somavedic, and I use that in my office. And so, there's some good European research on it. I think obviously it needs to be done to a greater degree, but I feel better trying to do something than nothing at all.
Right.
Yeah. And one thing too is like with, when I moved into this house, it was like everything was on Wi-Fi. My Nest, for the air conditioning, and then the cameras and my security system, like everything is Wi-Fi. So I turned Wi-Fi off of everything that I could just to help a little bit, there's just, it's just so much. There's just so much all the time.
Agreed. And it's kind of fun when you look at these gadgets and they're being sold to you like, oh, everything right on your phone. It's true. Like, it is convenient and it is really nice. And it's kind of amazing to look at, but it's just one more assault on the body with EMF. So we did the same exact thing. Try to turn off as many of those, or you get to push it, meaning like it's not always signaling, you cause it to be downloaded or pushed to you. And then it's a little bit better.
Yeah. So, with COVID came people working from home more. And so, people really don't realize, I think, all the things we're exposed to in the house, which we've covered a lot today. So in your book, you talk about sick building or sick home syndromes. Can you go into that a little bit more?
Yes. So, and one thing I did mention is one of the easiest things to begin to block a lot of these EMFs is with we use Safe Sleep, but you might have someone else that you like. I think Defender's another company.
Safe Sleep, yeah.
But my daughters, they're not on their iPads, all that often. But when we travel, they do get it, and so they have a Safe Sleep iPad case for their iPads. There's one for a laptop. If you're someone that likes to keep your laptop on your lap, literally,
we have Crystal and I both have them.
Yeah, they're great. They're great.
Yes,
yeah, good company.
And I keep mine in my back pocket. And so for me, I keep the Safe Sleep side against my body and then the phone facing out. And it really does work. I mean, again, I have an EMF meter right over my shoulder too.
That's
I use
great.
that. And just
so
say, okay,
you
does
really
this work?
tested it. That's awesome.
They're a good company. They've been around for a while, and it's not, I mean, you think about it, I don't know how, I mean, people might get a new phone a year, or every couple of years. It's a good investment for that. I really think, I mean, it lasts a long time. So big fan of that. So what else inside of your home besides the EMFs? The worst is actually with new homes, believe it or not. So with new homes come brand new materials. So you're getting, now, luckily, we did renovations on our new home. And before, no one ever talked about paints with the VOCs, volatile organic compounds. We mentioned that a few times now. So basically, it's an invisible gas. And this gas, when inhaled, begins to create inflammation in the body and specifically affect the nervous system and the brain. And so you could get a headache from it. You might get hives. You might get non-specific symptoms that might be more unique to you, whatever your genetic predisposition is. But that's how all paint used to be. That's how they made it. And so before, we were renovating like a decade ago, there was low VOCs. So we would always get the low VOC paint. Now it's low VOC or no VOCs, which is pretty amazing. So kind of caught on to that. But the insulation, blown-in insulation, is a huge one that a lot of people don't think about. It works amazingly well. It really keeps the AC in and the heat out, or the heat in and the cold out. So all of those things work really great, but all of that off gases as well. And this off gassing, again, can just, what it does is it further fills up the rain barrel. And I can't give you a specific disease, but it could be skin rashes. It could be autoimmune. It could be the psoriasis, it could be the thyroid. And it affects you in your own way, because inflammation isn't necessarily a root cause of a disease, but it is a factor in whether that disease will progress. And because it's essentially an immune response, right? So when we get inflammation, we're saying, okay, there's an immune response to something in our body. Should we suppress it? I don't know. If the inflammation is causing massive damage, maybe we do for a short period of time while we're working on the root cause. But just to suppress the inflammation is disregarding what's causing the inflammation in the first place. A couple other things in the home. I talked a little bit about it, but new furniture. If you are buying the like IKEA-based furniture with the not real wood, what's the name for that?
It's composite, or what is it? I'm not saying it right.
Formaldehyde.
Yeah, it is a composite, but it has formaldehyde. Exactly. Yes, it has all sorts of chemicals. It's not a real wood. And so they've compressed it together. There's formaldehyde sprayed on or soaked in this wood specifically, and then also on rugs. So most people don't know that the rugs come with the formaldehyde to kill all the different bugs that are basically in these factories that would be living in your carpets then when you get it to your home. So formaldehyde's a big one, and flame retardants is huge. So most furniture is sprayed with flame retardants. It's almost part of the law. When I looked at that for office furniture a bunch of years back, from a major manufacturer, they were all sprayed with flame retardants. And I had a wellness center with people with multiple chemical sensitivities. I'm like, I can't have flame retardants in there.
Yeah.
So what we look for is natural wood, natural wool, natural-based products. Again, they cost a little bit more, but hopefully you have them for a decade, and you can kind of look at it in that way. I also tell people, buying a shower filter, buying a bath filter, buying all these things, they all cost money. Replacing your cookware. We didn't talk about that, but aluminum pans. When you scrape those old aluminum pans, you're getting heavy metals into your body. When you scrape Teflon, you're getting all like a known cancer-causing carcinogen into your body when you cook. So people get overwhelmed, and I say, listen, start with the things that you use every day. Begin to replace those as you're able to, maybe one a month or one every quarter, and then just work from there. You don't have to replace all your pots and pans, but what's the one that you use every single night? Let's replace that one. And so that's typically how we begin to work it. And it does make a big difference. I mean, it makes a big difference over months and years which is ultimately what your health is all about, not what you do just today, but what you're doing consistently over time.
Exactly.
Pottery Barn is actually lately they're releasing furniture, and I just bought a bedroom set from them and the bedding, and it's like it says it's toxic free, but they list, if you go on their website, they list like free from, and it's a lot of stuff. So they're really working hard to try to understand this, and there's definitely no formaldehyde or anything like that on their stuff. But and it's true, because I am sensitive to anything like that. And I got this bed set, and I'm like, I'm going to have to sleep out of the room and let it off gas just in case. And I did not have to. I slept on it the day I got it, and I was completely fine. So, and I was talking at Restoration Hardware with the guy who works there, and he said by 2026, they're changing the rules to where like all furniture has to go through a certain level of like, no certain chemicals like formaldehyde. So, and I don't know if that applies to places like IKEA, or if it's, who that all applies to, but I thought that was pretty cool that they're at least getting the message and trying to do something,
Yeah. And I'm not saying that IKEA is bad. I mean, we purchase things from IKEA as well, but you just have to know ahead of time. So we basically have like a rule, like the bedrooms have to be ultra clean. So the mattress is, organic, it's tested, all those different things. Same with the sheets. We just use bamboo sheets, a clean comforter, the nightstands that are beside the bed. Those are going to be made from natural wood, no sprays, no toxic stains, because staining things can be super toxic as well. So that's what we look for the main, for the place that we know we're going to be spending 8 hours, 10 hours a day. And then obviously kitchen is a big one too. So the food, the water, the air, if people can start with those, it's going to make a tremendous difference at partially emptying the rain barrel, but also not refilling it in the future.
Right.
I know. And when we talk to patients and, listeners too, even the products and makeup and all these things you put on your body, slowly, it's hard to throw everything away. People get so overwhelmed. But when you know better, you do better, right? So just once you finish, throw it out, replace it with something better. So I love your approach with that. So you talk so much about, these toxic enemies, and he goes into such good detail, you guys, with this in his book, with the rain barrel effect. Can you go into your de-stress protocol and walk listeners through that and what you mean by that in the book?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was developed over a number of years before I even became a doctor of naturopathy and started to really work at a deeper level on this with my clients. So how it worked is when I would go to natural health practitioners, if it was an acupuncturist, they would do acupuncture. If it was a nutritionist, they would give me a nutrition-based plan, and so on and so forth, right? If it was a personal trainer, they give me an exercise-based plan. But the problem is that all of those individually would help me maybe get a little bit better, but it would never stick. Like I couldn't get completely well doing any one thing. And even to be honest, because it's the conventional medicine mindset. Like there's one pill, there's gonna be one thing that fixes this. It's the silver bullet. And so I went on my internship. So I did internships in India, and I did them in China at TCM hospitals. And it was amazing. I mean, in Europe as well, because I was looking still for the one form of practice that could heal everybody. And what I realized is that everything worked, but not with every person every time. And so what I realized is that you need to combine, you need to be integrative. And I know that's what the both of you do. So the de-stress protocol is just an acronym for diet, exercise, stress reduction, toxin removal, rest, which is sleep protocol. So calming the central nervous system, getting out of fight or flight, getting good quality, 90 minutes deep sleep, 2+ hours REM sleep. And then it's emotional balance. It's scientifically backed supplements, and it's the success mindset. And I added that last one. It's actually 3 of them are for stress, right? So it's stress, emotional balance, success mindset. So 3 out of the 8. And the reason I found is that the only people I couldn't help get well are those people that had deep levels of trauma and stress. And it just shot out their nervous system. What I mean by that is basically they're in fight or flight all the time. They're producing norepinephrine and cortisol. It's shutting down their thyroid. It's weakening their digestion. It's causing intestinal permeability all on its own, and IBS and IBD. And until you work on that part, now you can do it simultaneously with other things. And of course, you can use magnesium and ashwagandha and phosphoserine and all these great things. but they need to also work on the mind too. So when I started to say to people that you don't need to be 100% with your exercise, 100% with your diet, but if you can be 80% with these 8, that's all that we need. And so it actually gave people then a little bit of a leeway. Like they don't have to be perfect at all these different things. They can actually have a flex meal once or twice a week. They can enjoy themselves. They don't need to exercise every day. And then we bio-individualize that, right? So it's like, how much exercise do you need? Well, if your goal is to lose 100 pounds, you're going to do a little bit more than the person who's underweight and needs to gain, 10, 15, 20 pounds. And that's more catabolic. Okay. If I have this person doing 30 minutes of cardio 3-4 days a week, or 10,000 steps a day, that's probably going to be detrimental at this point. And walking is important, but 10,000 steps for them, maybe not until we fix the absorption issues and all the other issues they have going on. So that's how I look at my practice now. And that's what we've had the most success in, is helping people across the board rather than doubling down on just one thing. Because when people think of functional medicine, natural health, they think of sometimes lab testing, but definitely nutritional supplements. Yeah. And I wouldn't have gotten well without nutritional supplements. There's no doubt about it. They help balance my body, but I wouldn't have gotten to where I am today without the whole other lifestyle components as well. And that takes work, right? And that takes a little bit of work. So over time, we work those things into.
And like supplements aren't going to work if you were holding on to this trauma that's causing you to be in sympathetic overdrive all the time. And we have, working with a lot of MCAS patients, we have people who are so sensitive to everything in their limbic system. Like we have to start with that. We're like, you're not taking anything. Let's just start with the trauma and, calming down the nervous system. And it really does work if you know how to incorporate all of that stuff. So it's such a good point. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. It's such an overlooked part of it. And there is nothing in conventional medicine that looks at the mind being a part of the body. Mm-hmm. And it's very strange because we know that they're connected, right? We know that the brain, which let's say the mind is somewhere inside the body, outside the body, but somewhere here, and it connects to the body through the nervous system. And that's why such a big part of our practice is the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, which is going to wake you up with abundant energy every day, or you wake up with brain fog and grogginess and fatigue all on your own without caffeine. And so that's such a big part of it. And I know, again, that's a huge part of your practice too, which is why you're successful. That's really it. I think when you don't combine and look at the whole person, it's difficult to get people not to get well. People can get well by fad diet plans. They can lose weight through fad diet plans, but they can't get it to stick. And that's the big thing, is we don't want to necessarily see people every month in our practice. We want to help them get well. We'll check in once or twice a year. Like that's the goal.
That's great.
It's true. Yeah. Well, this has been so great. Thank you so much for coming on. We really appreciate it. And you've given so much information, and you guys have to get this book because he goes into a lot more. This is just kind of the tip of the iceberg. So thanks a lot.
I appreciate you having me on. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Where else can people find you?
My main website is stevencabral.com, and it's Steven with a PH. People will be able to see the podcast there. I have a podcast called The Cabral Concept, which is a daily show. And then they'll be able to find me on Instagram, just my name as well, Steven Cabral. So happy to chat there too.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on, and thanks everyone for listening.
If you can pop over and leave a review, that would be awesome. You can also find us over at healthbabes.com, where you can find our courses, our latest book. We also are on Instagram at The Health Babes, at Dr. Becky Campbell, or at Dr. Crystal Home. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day.